Evening. Yeah, let's quickly go through today's lesson. I think we lost quite some time trying to get this thing to behave. I don't know why it was doing what it was doing, but anyway, we're here now. Let's start. So my plan today is to quickly talk about QXmlStreamReader. Unfortunately, we don't have any past exam papers yet that have questions on the QXmlStreamReader. So if you've got any questions from any paper that I may have missed, please feel free to bring those so that we can discuss. But what I'm going to do though is quickly have an overview of how the QXmlStreamReader works, and then see if we've got any questions from anyone, because this is what we used for the assignment this year. So it does need to be understood. So what we've got here is just a diagram of the XML that we did during the semester. And this was registrations with attendees and booking dates and registration fees. And as usual, whenever you want to read or write XML, the first thing is to understand the structure of your XML. Understand what it looks like, understand the hierarchy, because that plays a big role in terms of then knowing how to write or read that XML. So in this case, we've got a registration list, and then within a registration list, we've got a couple of registrations. So we've got a registration and another one and another one. So there's many of them. So it's a list of registrations, which is quite clear from the name. And each registration is made up of an attendee, also a booking date, and a registration fee. An attendee has a name, an affiliation, and an email. So that's what we've got. So from this, we've got to recreate instances of registrations and then end up with a queue list of type registration. So you would know what this looks like if you had done the assignment. This is what you need to eventually end up with, and a registration is made up of everything that you can see here. So it's a class with a booking date, a registration fee, and a person instance. And that person instance is a name, affiliation, and email. That's all you are doing. So that's a registration, that's a list. Now, reading XML can be done in three ways. We can use DOM to read XML. We discussed that. You can use SACS to read DOM. You can use QXml stream, right, to read XML. And in terms of writing XML, you can use DOM to write. You can also use a stream to write, but you won't be using SACS to write XML. So those are your options when it comes to XML. And today we want to briefly just understand how to read XML with a stream reader. And reading XML with a stream reader, I think it's quite easy compared to SACS. I think SACS is the most difficult, probably followed by DOM, and then eventually QXmlStream. So a stream is pretty easy to use when it comes to reading XML. Now, when you are working with a stream, which is SACS, that's a stream, XmlStreamReader, that's a stream. So these two here are both streams, right? A stream reads your XML from top to bottom once, right? Just goes da 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 da, then it's done. It doesn't keep or remember anything in memory compared to what DOM does, because DOM reads everything into memory, and it's got this hierarchy or this structure stored, so you can navigate your hierarchy and understand the parent-child relationship that happens with your tags. But when it comes to streams only give you what they are reading at that time, nothing else. So your stream will start here and then read this and then read that and then read this, and so on and so on, which means if your stream is here, it doesn't know where it's been, it doesn't know where it's going. So you cannot say attendee is a child of a registration when using a stream, because when it's here, the only information that it has for you is where it is at that moment. So a stream can tell you what is the name of the tag it's reading, and what are the attributes in that tag, and what is the text in that tag. That's all, at that particular point in time. When you go .read, it goes to the next one, and it gets here. When it gets here, it can only give you information like what tag name, what is the tag name, what is the text, what are the attributes for that particular position that it's at. So your logic should factor your XML hierarchy into what the stream is doing so that you can then know what to do and when. That's how a stream works. So looking at this XML that we need to read right now, we're going to focus mostly on a QXML reader, which means in your code, you're going to define a reader and it's given the file that contains the XML, right? And the reason why I think COS3711 is easy to use is because you're going to be using about 2 or 3 functions to do everything, right? So when you start, your reader is here, right? About to read your XML. And what you're going to do is, let's see if I can get this thing to behave. Okay, perfect. So what I was saying is when you start reading your XML, your reader is, let's say here, right? That's where it's going to start. That's when you define it and it's been given a file. Now the next thing that you need to do when you call the read next function, it's simply going to it's simply going to move your reader to the next tag or next element, right? So when you go reader.read next, it moves your reader to this position, right? So when your reader gets to the registration list element, you don't want to do anything, right? And the way you want to build your list is collect the name, the affiliation, the email, the booking date, and the registration fee. You can collect all of this at once. And once you've collected all this information, you can then use it to make a registration instance, which is a 2-part phase in terms of this class. You use these 3 here to create a person, which is the attendee. And then you use this person to then make a registration. So a registration takes a person and registration takes a person, a booking date, and a registration fee. This is what you then use to make your registration instance. That's your logic, right? Which means all you want to do is when your reader is going through this XML, when it gets to name, get that name. When it gets to affiliation, get the text. When it gets to email, get the text. Store this somewhere. Then when it gets to booking date, get the text, store this somewhere. When it gets to registration fee, get this text, store this somewhere. When your reader gets to the end tag of registration here, you know that you've collected everything that you want. So when your reader gets here, you can then make your registration. So all of this creation of a registration instance is happening when your reader gets to this tag. Then you can go and say, let me create a registration. That's what you're doing. And all of this is happening inside a loop. So what you're going to do is you're going to call reader.next, which moves you to registration list. Do nothing. Then you can enter a loop. So this then goes into a loop. So you put this in a while loop. So you say, while I've not reached the end of the file, what do you want to do? Then you go read next. It gets here in your while loop, right? Then you can say, if your registration, if your element is registration, what do you want to do? You collect the type of registration. So to do that, you're going to use, so you can see the code here is pretty straightforward, very straightforward. If reader.name, this is the first function you must learn. The name function gives you the name of the tag. That's all you need to know. The name function gives you the name of the tag. So if your tag is equal to registration, then what do you want to do? You want to collect the value of the attribute, this type, right? So here we go, type equals reader.attributes.value. Then you specify the value of the attribute that you want to read. Everything is .toString, right? That's how you read your attribute. So when using a reader, you want to understand, number 1, how to read an attribute, right? Number 2, how to check the current element. How do I know which element I'm reading? So you're going to use .name to know the element, .attributes to get the attribute, .attributes.value. So this says, give me the value of this attribute. So you can see that now it's a series of if statements because we don't know which position our reader can be. So we are simply saying if our reader is here, then let's get the registration. Otherwise, if our reader is here, so in your loop here, you're going to have a reader dot read next at the bottom, read next. And this loop is going to run as long as your reader has not yet reached the end of the file here. So all you're doing is you're saying, keep reading the next element. And then if I'm reading registration, I know that I need to get the type. You collect the type. If I'm reading, you don't care about this one because it doesn't do anything, whether it's here or not. This is useless. So you never check for the attendee tag because there's no information there. We don't care about it. So in this case, I can simply watch for name, affiliation, and email. So all I'm doing now is if the tag is name, get the text. So how do you get the text within a tag? You just use the read element text function. So that's the next function that you need to use. This gives you the text within the element. And you can see that is all that happens when you're reading email, name, email, or affiliation. So if your reader is here, or here, or here, just read the text and store it in a variable. So if it's name, store it in a variable called name. If it's email, store this in a variable called email. If it's affiliation, these are bugs. This should say affiliation. So this should be affiliation. You store that in a variable called affiliation, right? And because remember, you are trying to collect everything at once. It doesn't matter if your reader gets to the end of the attendee tag. You don't want to do anything. You could, if you want, make a person instance here, but it doesn't really make a difference because there's only one person anyway. So you can just continue and say, if it's booking date, what do? You read your element text. Now, what's happening here is we are simply converting this date back to an actual date. That's why you see this from string function, but pretty much we are getting the text. If it's, so this XML doesn't really match exactly what we were doing in the assignment. We had a qualification for the attendee. We also had a category for the attendee, and we didn't have a registration fee. So yeah, there was quite some difference in terms of our attributes. But anyway, that's all you're doing. You're simply reading your attributes. And you can see it's that simple. I'm simply checking, where am I? Am I here, here, or where? So once your reader gets to the end element of registration, what do you know? I've read everything that I need to make this registration, which means when your reader gets to the closing tag, that's when you want to create your registration. So you see that your first if statement is simply says if it's a start element, because your reader is going to say this is a start element. When it gets here, it says this is an end element. Like this one also is an end element. So all of this that we were reading, our if statements are simply going, if it's a start element, let's find out what it is and let's get all the details, right? That's what we are doing here. When it gets to an end element, we want to check, is it registration? Because this is the only one we care about. We don't care about this one or this one or this one because we don't want to do anything when your reader gets to the end element of name or affiliation or email, because remember your reader is going step by step. It gets here, it gets here, it gets here. It just goes step by step until it gets to the end. So you don't want to intervene whenever it's not yet at the registration end element, which means after this, what do? We go if is end element. And what do? Right? If is end element, we only want to check, is it registration? If it's registration, then we can just make an instance of a registration. And you can see we use our type to check what type it is. And we use our variables to then create a new instance of that registration. and we take that registration and we add it to our list, and we keep going, and we keep going. That's the way you use a reader. So eventually, all your code looks like this. So what are we doing here? We are simply saying, let's zoom in a little bit. We are simply saying, let's make a reader, right? Okay. What you see here initially is, let's forget about, there's the whole function right now. So we've got our file that we want to read, our list that we're going to return. So every registration that we make, we're going to add it to this list. And then we open our file. Then we define our reader. That's important. That's our reader there. And we give it the file that we want to read. Most of this code in the exam, if they want you to read, will be provided. So they would give you like parts of this code. Then you start. Because you read next just gets you into the top level element. So it reads your root tag, which is, in this case, this one. And then after this, your reader gets to the first registration list. So what do? Now you enter into a loop. So after this, you go read next, and then don't do anything. And then, as long as your reader is not yet at the end of the file, that's when we start doing, is this a start element? If it's a start element, then we can use our logic and our if statements to collect all the information that we need. If it's an end element, we only watch out for the registration end element, and in there, we just make our instance, because when it gets here, it means we have collected everything that we need to make a registration instance. And you've got this code with you already under your assignment folder. So I think you should be able to run this application even. But basically, that's how you use a stream reader to read your XML. And you can see that in your loop, it keeps on advancing this reader to the next part of your XML until it gets to the end. So your logic in terms of creating the XML depends on the structure of the XML. There's no one solution for everything here, because your XML can be different. It can be XML with attributes only, or it can be XML without attributes. The hierarchy can be different. So you've got to apply your mind and then say, given this structure that I have, how can I create a registration? When do I need to collect what? And at what point do I need to make an instance? Those are the two questions you need to ask yourself. Number one, when to collect information. And number two, when to make an instance. Usually you realize that you always make your instances usually in your end element tag, because you want to do it at the end of the tag after your reader has collected information. And you also realize that most of the information that you collect, you do this in the start element part of your reader. When it's reading the opening tag, that's when you've got access to the attributes. That's when you've got access to the information. So you collect usually in the start elements, and you make your instances in the end elements, because there, when it gets there, you know that you've reached the end of a section in your XML, and you can then use everything that you've collected to then make an instance. Otherwise, in terms of the actual structure and when to do what, it simply depends on the XML. But generally, you would collect your information in the start elements, and then you make your instances in the end elements. That's your reader. And the beauty is, in the exam, they don't give you like massive XML like this, which is an assignment example. In the exam, they give you like very tiny XML, because all they want is for you to illustrate that you do understand how to use a reader, and what functions exist, and what functions to use, and when to use them. That's all that's important. So you can get an XML with one tag, one level hierarchy, and that's it. And they say, here is code. Can you do this? And again, remember, in exams, sometimes you don't get straightforward questions. It can be mixed up with reflection, with anything. And because you won't really find a lot of, or if any, if any question that uses a QXML stream reader, what you can do is find a question that does reading with anything, like whether it's using DOM or SACS, whatever, and just answer that question using a stream reader. That's how you can practice and see that you understand how to use a QXML stream reader to read XML. So pick up any question that's reading XML, answer that question using a stream reader. So you simply replace whatever they want you to do and do it instead with a stream reader. That's how you know that you've understood the question and you've understood how to read XML with an XML stream reader. So just to do a quick recap, the good thing is you're only using about 3 or 4 functions. You've got read next, which advances your reader, is start element to check if it's start element, is end element to check if it's at the end, and then you read your text with read element text. That's easy to remember. Read the dot name to check the name of the tag, and then you've got read the dot attributes to read your attributes. Those are the only functions we are going to be using when dealing with a stream reader. And it just becomes a matter of practice and getting used to these function names. But again, it's an open book exam. You don't have to cram those functions. You just need to know them and be able to look up whenever you need to. But in terms of the logic, this is how you use an XML stream reader. Okay, so I don't have any past exam type questions here to use to discuss this because they don't exist. I have not seen any XML stream reader questions. If you've got one, let me know. But I think what you can do though is try and practice this with any question that reads XML and uses a different approach. And if you get stuck, you let me know and we can dive into that together and help each other. But otherwise, I think that's one topic where which you won't find in any of the existing videos because we've never dealt with a QXML stream reader before. But yeah, that's generally the logic for reading XML with a stream reader. Okay, so I ran and cruised through this. You need time to really apply your mind and understand how to use a reader. But I do believe it's quite straightforward to read XML with a reader, and especially that in exams they don't give you like a large XML file. So you won't have, like in this case, 6 or 7 if statements that are, they'll give you one, like one here, one for this. So you'd have like 1 or 2 if statements usually, and then maybe 1 to then do your instance creation and all of that. Yeah, but it's not very difficult compared to SACS or DOM. I think this is fairly easy if you practice, of course. All right, so let's see if we've got any questions on this.